World War I started in 1914. Before World War I, European empires dominated global trade. So you had Britain, France, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire. The pound, the British pound, was the global reserve currency. It was backed by gold. The Rothschild banking dynasty had massive influence over Britain, France, and Germany, and they had been financing their industrial expansions and wars with each other. American finance was rising, JP Morgan, Rockefeller, but it was still secondary to the London banks. And the Ottoman Empire controlled oil, which was blocking the French and the British ambition. World War I destroyed European economies. Britain borrowed $4 billion from US banks, and that shifted financial power to Wall Street. The Treaty of Versailles intentionally crushed the German economy. This created conditions for the extremists to come later, ensuring that a second war was inevitable. Prescott Bush, George Bush's grandfather, was exposed for funding the Nazis. Wall Street and the City of London had invested in the German war industry. Henry Ford and IBM supplied the Nazis with material. US bankers funded both sides of the war. JP Morgan and Rockefeller sent loans to Britain and Germany. Wars need a lot of money, and so when governments don't have enough, they borrow it. Who funds war? Banks and industrial capitalists. They profit no matter who wins. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913, just before World War I. Very convenient timing for US war loans. The US knew the Japanese were planning to attack Pearl Harbor, but they let it happen. Declassified Pentagon documents prove this, because it gave Roosevelt an excuse to enter the war. The outcome of World War II was that the US became the world's dominant economy, so that the US dollar became the world's reserve currency. The IMF and the World Bank were created to serve American interests. And in 1945, the UN is created and global governance starts to take shape. A global governance structure that heavily favors American interests. At this point in history, the military-industrial complex becomes permanent. Endless war equals endless profits. The IMF and the World Bank claim that they're helping to develop countries, but what they actually do is trap nations in debt to the West, force privatization of government, cut social services in the name of austerity. All of these institutions allow the US to hold veto power. So if you don't have the US in agreement, it's not happening. That's not global governance, that's US hegemony. Countries have to adopt Western capitalism to receive aid from the World Bank or the IMF. The US uses its financial power to weaken its allies. Yes, its allies. It is a weapon against socialism, self-sufficiency, and any kind of non-Western economic growth. Neoliberalism has become default global policy. In 2018, the IMF gave $57 billion to Argentina, but the conditions, the strings that it attached to that loan, led to 100% inflation in the Argentinian economy. Argentina couldn't pay this back, and so they're still stuck in a perpetual debt restructuring trap with the IMF, who are a mafia. This was strategically planned for total imperial dominance. The end of World War II was the creation of the New World Order, where US is the only dominant superpower and the Soviet Union is controlled opposition, because the military-industrial complex is permanent. The Cold War ensured ongoing arms spending. The evidence suggests that these conflicts were not purely organic. These were engineered crises that allowed financial elites to consolidate even more global power to themselves. We know financial institutions funded both sides. We know that post-war reconstructions centralized economic and political power to the US. And we know that these wars destroyed old power structures like the Ottoman Empire that were in the way of Western imperial ambition. The war expansions justify mass surveillance, permanent militarization, centralized governance. World War I led to the British and US takeover of the Middle East, And World War II established the permanency of the military-industrial complex. It may still be quite controversial to say that these wars were started intentionally. I can have my own opinion on that one. But even if they weren't, which they were, they were opportunities to bring about shifts in global power. And the US do this all the time. It's called disaster capitalism. Naomi Klein wrote a book on it. I highly recommend you read.